My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today we're going to talk about the third rail in psychology, which I think is this. And the big question for today, can narcissists change? And if they can change, do they actually change? Now, I believe this is the third rail in psychology because everywhere you look, people are talking about this. And if you look at YouTube, there's a tremendous amount of influencers that have really pushed this thought process that narcissists are horrible people, they can't change, they were born that way. And I can see this because if you have communication or a relationship with narcissists, especially if they're on the malignant side, it can be very devastating for people, and I can understand that. So a lot of these shows from these influencers will have an amazing impact on people because emotions move people much more than facts and science do. But I do have a little bit of a problem with this because they're not looking into most of the facts. They hide those facts, or they just don't know them because they're not professionals. You know, and the other part of it is there are mental health clinicians with degrees who are also riding this wave to make a lot of money. So they're basically grifters because they're not giving you all the information. I would say a couple of months ago, I actually went to a conference, and I can't name names because I don't want to get myself in trouble because I am licensed and I don't want anything to happen here. But probably the world's most renowned couples therapist, I was at their conference. And when they do the assessment right up front on a couple, and they believe that one of them or both of them has a personality disorder, especially if it's NPD, they won't do therapy with you. And we can have a long talk about that later on, but I think if you're a mental health clinician and you're looking away from people because you don't want to work hard, because you might think it might be difficult, I'm not sure you're in the right business. You know, a long time ago, the third rail used to be borderline personality disorder, where therapists were like, I don't want any part of this because it's really difficult to work with. They said it's untreatable. It's not untreatable. It's just untreatable if you're a therapist that doesn't want to do the work. You know, we found out that it's highly treatable. You know, we look at DBT, for example. And what is DBT? Just not to go too far off the rails here, but DBT really is nothing more than cognitive behavioral therapy and some mindfulness, which is what? Which is Buddhism. So both disciplines are like 2,000 years old. So if we can find the answers in things that are already there from like 2,000 years ago, you can't tell me that NPD or a narcissist can't change. So let's take a look at this more. Let's ask the question straight up. Can a narcissist change? Yes, but there's some caveats here. Number one, it has to be their idea. They have to be motivated. They have to feel like they have a reason to do it, and they'll have this what's in it for me attitude. Now, that in itself sounds narcissistic, maybe, right? But I can tell you something. I've been a personal trainer for over 30 years. Nobody does anything unless there's a benefit to them. Do you think people really want to come in and work out 5 days a week? Do you think they actually want to go on a restrictive diet unless there's a benefit to them? You know the answer here. So I don't find that a narcissist wanting to change just because it benefits them is unusual. I think it's highly human. I see it almost every day, and I have seen it every day, whether it's in my therapy business or training business. People want to know what's in it for them, and that's just the bottom line. So that's not unusual. So let's move on from that. Quick little review, just so we're all on the same page. Narcissism, you've got NPD, and you've got narcissistic traits. It's on a continuum. So we can look at it in many different ways. So we can look at it from the most benign to the most malignant, to the most passive, to down the middle, more assertive, all the way to aggressive. We can look at it as a person who's very selfless. We can also look at it as a person who, on the other end of the scale, is very selfish. Now, if you're at the one end of the scale, more towards being a malignant narcissist with true narcissistic personality disorder, you would probably have what we call the dark triad, which would be psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and sadism. So let's start with that, so we're all on the same page from there. So let me ask you this question again. If you don't think that narcissism, or a person with narcissistic personality disorder, or a person with narcissistic traits can change, let me ask you this question. Do you believe that narcissism has been increasing in the United States and the world over for the last 10 to 15 years? There's an obvious answer here because there is a narcissism epidemic. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we all answered yes to that. It's increasing. So you know what you just did? You just blew your argument. Because if you say that narcissists can't change and you're agreeing that narcissism is increasing, you just finished saying that it changes. So just a simple basic question like that would knock you off your perch a little bit. So what I'm saying here is, let's say you're a very passive person, and our community, the way it is, society the way it is right now, you would probably move towards being a little more assertive and possibly all the way to aggressive. That's possible. And if you are assertive, you might find yourself moving a little bit more towards aggression, a little bit more narcissistic. Now, the big question as it goes along is, does somebody want to move from aggressive down to assertive, or assertive down to passive? That's where the big question is, because we know beyond the shadow of a doubt, people with narcissism change. They tend to get worse, but can they get better? There's the other difference. So I have a really good study here, and part of what I want to show you today is three major things. Why narcissists don't change, number one, and why they actually would want to change, number two, and number three, why people don't think that they can change at all. So on the first study I want to show you is a reason why narcissists don't want to change. It's because there's a lot of benefit to it. So let's take out this study over here. And let me give you the conclusion right up front. The conclusion is this: women prefer narcissistic men. And as a matter of fact, they like them for everything. Do they like them for one-night stands? Yes. Do they like them for, let's say, a long-term boyfriend? Yes. Do they like them as a marriage partner for the rest of their life? Answer, yes. So we're already saying, like, so if you are a man and you are on the narcissistic scale, why would you want to back that off when you're getting so much benefit from it? And here's the worst part of this study, is that women actually don't mind that much the men who are on the malignant side of the scale, which again would include Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism. Now I know you could be angry at me right now, but we need to just go over this. I'm actually going to go over some of the questions. So let me add just a little bit of fun to this, because I'm really into football, as you might have known from the previous video. It's football season. So I'm going to do these questions. We're going to figure out who's going to win. Is it the benign or is it the malignant? Is it the passive guy who's going to win, or is it the aggressive guy? Is it the selfless or the selfish? So we've got two teams here. So let's see if the narcissists win. Let's go by what the women say. So first question in the test, it says to women, do you prefer when a man pursues you passively and lackadaisically, or do you prefer a man who pursues you passionately? What did the women say? They said they want to be pursued passionately. Well, that's high up on the narcissism scale, so let the narcissist cheer. 1-0 narcissist. Number two, do you prefer a man who is chivalrous? Most women said yes. Chivalrous is high up on the narcissism scale. So answer number two, win for the narcissist. Number three, do you prefer a man who says, would you like to go out for dinner tonight about 7 o'clock? Or would you prefer the man who says, hey, what are you up to today or tomorrow or next week? Most women would prefer the man who is more assertive and he seems like he has his stuff together. So that's a little bit more high up on the narcissism scale. So question number 3, the narcissists win again, and they're going to stand up and cheer again because they're winning. Number 4, confidence in a male is more alluring than modesty. Women again went for the confidence. A confident male tends to be more narcissistic. Another win, narcissism. Number 5, male vanity is an attractive attribute. Women said that that's true, which would be more higher up on the narcissism scale. Number 6, I am attracted to men who take pleasure in being the center of attention. Most women said that they do prefer a man who takes pleasure in being the center of attention, which of course is more, you guessed it, narcissistic. So I think that's, the narcissists are winning over the selfless, passive, benign men. 6-0. Number 7, are you drawn to a man who displays authority with the resounding yes? Authority is a sign of having a narcissistic trait. So again, narcissists win again. Number 8, a man who uses manipulation to influence his success at work is attractive. Believe it or not, women said yes to this. Why? Because a man who can manipulate a little bit, especially at work, and they advocate for themselves, are better at acquiring resources for the family. So yes, even though they might not admit it out loud, but if they do take a test and it's anonymous, they will say that they like a man who's on their side, who's going to do whatever it takes. So, all right. So there's no way the other guys are going to catch up here, the empathetic guys. They're going to lose because it's 8-0 already. So let's do 2 more. I prefer men who are a little dangerous over a man who is harmless. Women here said they do prefer a man who's a little dangerous, which this kind of gets even a little bit scarier because this is on the malignant side of the scale. So again, we're talking about sadism, we're talking about Machiavellianism, we're talking about a little bit of psychopathy here. So again, 9-0, narcissists win. Number 10, I prefer a man who likes to win in all areas of life over a man who is comfortable with settling for whatever he gets. Again, women are going to want to be with a guy who's aggressive and who pushes himself out there, who's a little bit grandiose, who does say he's good at things and he tries to go out and prove it all the time. So again, so let's just end it there because it's 10-0. And as you can see, why in the world would a lot of narcissists want to change? When not everybody, but so many people love narcissists. They love those traits. So again, you have to give a narcissist a reason to change. So if you say to a narcissist, well, you don't change, you'll never change. And they go, listen, I'm so successful though. And women by and large love who I am. You know, it's like, who else is a narcissist? You know, let's take somebody like Joe Namath, just for fun. I might be showing my age here, but I'm doing this football thing. So Joe Namath, if you look him up, you know, he's one of the most famous quarterbacks who ever lived for the New York Jets when they won the Super Bowl. But if you look at his stats, he has about the same amount of touchdowns as he does interceptions. And nothing says average more than that. Joe Namath, as loved as he is for his haughtiness, his grandiosity, was an average at best quarterback, nothing more. But people love the fact that he had all of that grandiosity, telling everybody, we're going to win, we're great, I'm the best. People love that. You know, I could name 10 more people like that. Let's do this real quick. Charlie Watts died about a week ago from the Rolling Stones. He was 80 years old. It was sad. And I don't mean to be mean here. But what I'm trying to say is that he was a great drummer. The Rolling Stones have been around probably longer than any other rock band in the world, known as the world's greatest rock and roll band. Now, when asked, because they asked the guys from The Who and some other people, what do you think about when they called the Rolling Stones the world's greatest rock and roll band? And the answer was, it's self-proclaimed, right? Like, they marketed themselves as that. Nobody actually thought that they were the world's greatest rock and roll band until many years later, because that's all they marketed themselves as. Kiss does that as a band too. Kiss has very marginal talent, but every show they say you wanted the best, now you got the best. And so again, we love narcissists. You have to give people a reason to change. So let's move on from that, because I don't want the show to get too long and I could belabor that point to death. Okay, so do you believe that people are born as narcissists, that they can't change? And a lot of people believe this. And what do they do to prove this? So if you believe that people are born with NPD, what you can do is you can kind of prove it by looking at MRIs, right? You can look at brain imaging and you could say, wow, if you look at the brain on this particular narcissist, what'll happen is that they seem to have a lower capacity for empathy based on certain parts of the brain. And that's true, absolutely true. But like in football, right? Like when there's an infraction, they throw a flag. I can't throw a flag right now. So here's the problem with that. We got to stop play, right? Because it's disingenuous at best to say that you can look at a brain scan and go, oh, this person was born with that, because that's not totally true. Let's look at some other areas. Let's say you were physically abused. Let's say you were emotionally abused. You go through, let's say you have a lot of trauma as a child. Let's say you were brought up poor, and you thought the world was a scary place. And then you did a brain scan of that person. Let's say you have complex post-traumatic stress. Let's say you have post-traumatic stress disorder. Any of these things, if you look at a person's brain in an MRI, you would find the same thing. You would find that there's going to be difficulty in the prefrontal cortex, right, the reasoning part of the brain. You would find that the hippocampus is smaller, and you would find out that the amygdala is malfunctioning, which is the emotional part of the brain, right? What they would call the lizard part of the brain. It's the emotional center. So you would see that on an MRI based on what? What caused that? Trauma causes that. So if you believe that trauma causes personality disorders, but now you're taking narcissistic personality disorder and saying, oh no, those people, they were born that way. They can't change because of their brain structure. Again, that would be, it's flag on the play. That's totally wrong. You need to be stopped. You need to be moved back 10 or 15 yards and take a real look at this. Even if you did believe that that's true, that a narcissist is born a narcissist because of their brain structure, we have to take a look at something else that they don't want to look at, is that the brain has plasticity. What does that mean? It means it changes based on its environment. Once we know this, we can look into some other things where people did think that the brain was static or fixed. And this is where we get into the really ugly part of psychology, right? Because it used to be thought that IQ was fixed. But why did they think that? Because there were magazines out there, like what would you call it, Mankind Quarterly, which was basically put out by white supremacists. And what happened is they kept putting stuff out there saying, like, they would compare an IQ of white people from Switzerland, and then they would compare the IQ from black people in some poor part of Africa, and they would go, oh look, the IQ is always better in white people. And then they ended up using, I think it was 17 different white supremacists to come up with the book, The Bell Curve. And they would use that and they would say, listen, I'm sorry, we're not racist. We're not any of that. It's just that the IQ lines up, that the IQ in white people happens to be higher than the IQ in black people, and it's fixed. It can't be changed. All lies. Again, where's the flag on the play? Because, let's look at the Flynn effect. The Flynn effect now has looked at IQs from different places. And lo and behold, it turns out, if you give people access to water, access to food, access to proper sanitation, actual education and books, guess what? The IQs go through the roof. brain plasticity. Brains change all the time. If you're listening to me right now and you start saying, okay, I want to take up, like, I want to do crossword puzzles, your brain will change. So to say that a narcissistic brain is fixed it's bordering on being disgusting, because that's the same garbage that white supremacists use when they said that white people IQ is higher, but they never looked at, they had access to water and to food and to housing and to education and all this stuff. You can't compare the two. Under the same circumstances, everybody's IQ went up. Let's move on. Can sociocultural differences and factors contribute to narcissism? And I want to ask another question. Do learning environments shape your personality? Right? It's important questions. So what if you had a bunch of people that had the same background, same nationality, same culture, and a lot of times the same genetics even, and you were able to separate one from the other, but change the political ideology on each side? And now look at narcissism. You know, what if we had a way to actually do that? Guess what? We do. Why? Because in October of 1990, Germany became a unified capitalistic society. Before that, they were split between West Germany being capitalistic and East Germany being socialist. When the wall came down in '89, that's when they mixed and they became a capitalistic society. And then they were able to do the study that I'm going to talk about right now. What do you think that they found out? Right? So I'll tell you, number one, grandiose narcissism on the capitalistic side, on the individualistic side was through the roof compared to the Eastern side. What else? On the Western side, their self-esteem was low, which is interesting because a lot of times that they say that grandiose narcissism is correlated with high self-esteem. And this they found out that it's not. Because if you're brought up in a culture that says that you're good for who you are and not for what you've done lately, turns out that your self-esteem is much better than if you keep trying to base your self-esteem off of achievements, which is basically the calling card of capitalism. So again, when the wall came down, the culture came together. Again, a lot of times there were families that were split up. So you're looking at the same genetics. What would happen is that you would see that there was a massive difference in narcissism compared to one to the other. But then what happened? Over time, the people who had come from East Germany, their narcissism went up. You know, nothing proves anything, okay? It indicates it, right? And it suggests it. But again, if you want a nuanced look, you got to take a look at this stuff. Now, grandiose narcissism, there's a ton of evidence that shows that it decreases with age. Why? Because it's hard to be grandiose and think you're awesome and you're the best looking person there when you're getting older. So you're going to have to drop some of that. Just as a fun aside today, not to make fun of anybody, because I really enjoy this gym that I go to, but they're all young guys. So it's kind of funny. You go there and it's like there's 3 young owners and they lease a car together. So they drive around in this really cool fluorescent Lamborghini. You know, these young guys, as narcissistic as heck, right? So, like, I wonder, as an older guy looking, like when younger women look at them, do they actually think it's a loser move for 3 separate guys to own or to lease the same Lamborghini? It's like one guy gets it on Monday, Tuesday, the other guy gets it on the weekends, whatever. But listen, that's a show of narcissism here. The whole gym attracts that kind of thing. So I watch people, they're doing selfies. You know, back in the day, if we had access to take pictures, I'd be taking pictures of girls. You know, and I'm sure the guys would be taking pictures of girls too. And girls would be taking pictures of guys. Like today, it's like, look how beautiful I am. So narcissism has been increasing every which way you look. But to be honest, these people are pretty beautiful, right? They look good facially. The girls come in, they're all, I don't know how many surgeries that they've had. You know, the guys come in and like you know, they got Lamborghinis and new Corvettes and everything else, and you know they can't afford any of them, but they're certainly putting up all the haughtiness of it. You know, if you're into music and you like The Who, which you probably don't, but that's okay, I do. Peter Townsend, the greatest writer of all time, he talked about narcissism with a different name. He talked about eminence front, right? It's a fake front that you're trying to act better than everybody. It's hard to do as you get older, though, in certain ways. Be that as it may, narcissism is difficult to change in our society because there's so many benefits to it, because people reward it all the time. We're getting a little close. I want to try to keep this to 30 minutes so I don't bore everybody to death. But let's take a look at what's called theory of mind. What is theory of mind? Theory of mind is the ability to understand the mental states of other people, said in a different way, cognitive empathy. Narcissists, whether they are on the continuum, right, if they have the traits or they have the actual personality disorder, have theory of mind, most of them, which means that they have cognitive empathy. They know what makes you happy. They know what makes you sad. They just can't feel what you feel. So in terms of treatment, what can we do with this? Is it possible to change them? Let's say they were in a relationship that they really wanted to nurture because they cared about the relationship. Maybe there was something about it that they just want that relationship. Well, maybe they have a girlfriend that says, listen, I really love roses, I want roses. And a narcissistic man would be like, I don't feel that. I can't understand why a woman would want dead flowers. Like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. Why is that exciting? Why does that make you happy? I don't get it. But from a cognitive point of view, he knows that it makes this girl happy and it will get him what he wants. So the behavior, if you can teach this person this, that if the relationship is important enough to him, he will know what's important to her and he will act in a behavioral sense and do it. And he will get those roses. Now, if somebody's out there trying to be a little more contrarian, they could say, listen, Joe, you didn't change the narcissist because inside he still has that personality. Maybe he does, but who cares? Right? In drug and alcohol addiction treatment, they talk about faking it till you make it. Who cares? Like, as long as the behavior is there, do you care about the motivation underneath it? Right? Like, you buy a rattle for your child because your infant loves rattles. Like, you may not understand the excitement that that kid has and feel what they feel, but as long as you're doing the right thing, can anybody ask for more? Maybe not. Let's look at another psychological thought here. Egocentric. What does egocentric mean, and what will it mean for treatment? Egocentric means is that the behaviors and feelings that are acceptable to the person, they are acceptable because they meet the needs of that person's ego. So in other words, most narcissists, the reason why they don't change is because they're getting what they want out of life. If they realize that they're not getting what they want out of life, then they will change. Now, to go back to borderline for a second, a lot of people have borderline personality disorder. It's ego dystonic because they understand that their rages, their emotional dysregulation causes a lot of damage in their relationships. And if they want to keep that relationship, they're going to have to tone down their emotions or figure out a way to regulate. So, and they understand the pain that they cause. So if you are egocentric, you're getting your needs met. So what does that mean on the other side? It can mean that the other person has to draw tremendous boundaries here and say, you need to stop. If this relationship is important to you, I need you to do this. And a narcissist always wants to be the best one in the room. So going back to the flower analogy, you can actually use their type of manipulation. And what would happen is that narcissists would probably go out and get the best roses that they could find. Probably more than a dozen. Why? Because if they're going to buy roses, they want to be the best rose buyer in the world. You know, so it's what they need. You have to work off of what the narcissist is looking for. Again, why would they change if they're getting everything they want? It's a good question, right? So I think I said everything I wanted to say here about this. Real quick, again, can narcissists change? Absolutely, they can change. Do narcissists change? Absolutely, they do. But if you're in a relationship with somebody, let me just finish with this. Don't take it personally if they don't change. It has to be their, what they want to do. Don't feel like you're not lovable if they don't change for you. And don't feel like you could love them enough to make them change. Again, it's all upon them. They may think that the relationship with you is the most incredible thing, the most awesome thing in the world. But their reason for not changing might be because deep down inside, they don't like who they are. They have a very fractured sense of self, so they had to build up this fake self. And facing themselves and facing true reality with them, and to admit that they're not as good as they think they are or that they try to put out to people, is more hurtful for them to use a phrase, it's more hurtful for them to come out than it is to lose a relationship sometimes. And that's so hard. And in that sense, going with the YouTubers that put out stuff, I'm with you there. It's a very, very hurtful, very hard thing to go through, to be through, especially when they're your parents, right? You know, it's very difficult, and there I can definitely agree with you. But I did want to take a nuanced look at this, and that's all I have to say today. Hopefully this was beneficial to you. Please share it, put a like on it, and subscribe. Thank you.